All content contained in this video is created for informational purposes only. This video is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Seek the medical advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard in this video. Hey, I'm Honeysuckle, and welcome to my channel, Psychosis Experience. In this video, I want to go over another hero's journey that I went through involving psychosis. The last video was a bit longer than this second part. First part might have lasted maybe around a year from the beginning to the end, and then this second one lasted maybe a few months. So let me get into it. So going into the hero's journey parallel, the starting point is the ordinary world. So at this point, this is October of 2018. October of 2018. I got the job that I have now. It's an IT help desk type of job. I start seeing a woman romantically, and I feel pretty much strong again after having gone through a big psychosis experience. Moving on to the call to adventure. This is me revisiting the Law of One, which in my last video, the Law of One was a mentor figure. It's a book series or online reading about spiritual ideas. But this time, back in October, I specifically started looking into the archetypal mind. The archetypal mind is this idea that there are different parts of ourselves that we can bring up inside our mind. Particularly, the major arcana in the tarot would be a parallel for the archetypal mind. Some examples of an archetype would be like the feminine or masculine aspects, a warrior aspect, a healer aspect, a sage aspect or wise person aspect, a death aspect, and there are a bunch of others. Particularly in the tarot, there would be 22 different aspects, 21 different cards, and then the number 0 would be like the Fool, would represent the self. Going into the back to the hero's journey again, the refusal of the call. This time I did refuse the call. I remember throwing out my tarot cards. Particularly, I remember going to the inside the I don't know what the word is, the parking structure. In my parking structure, there was a trash can. I remember throwing out my tarot cards in there. I also remember. So I threw out. I think I threw out my minor arcana cards, and then I gave away my major arcana cards to the girl that I was seeing. Going back to the hero's journey parallel, meeting the mentor. This time the mentor wasn't necessarily Law of One. I think it was more so having to do with Buddhism. I remember creating a Buddhism subreddit, and I started reading a lot of free stuff, free PDFs on Buddhism. I remember there was one particular American-based monk that I remember reading a translation of the Four Noble Truths by. And then back to the hero's journey parallel of crossing the threshold. This is when I started smoking weed again. I thought that I had built up enough mental strength that I could handle smoking weed again. So I started smoking once a week on the weekend, or at least my weekend, which is Thursday and Friday. Going into the hero's journey parallel for test allies and foes. Foes would have been people from the spiritual based subreddit I used to be part of. I went back there to try to integrate it back into my life, but I didn't really see it as something true anymore. I saw it as more like a part of the reason why I went into psychosis the first time. An ally that helped me a little bit was the girl that I was seeing, and some tests that I remember. Um, I remember looking at the tarot cards while I was smoking weed and thinking that I was um, some kind of guide. So thinking that the cards were some kind of guide for getting what you want. That it was like some kind of story that you would go through, and at the end you would like achieve the goal that you set out to get. I also remember talking with a guy that I found on Reddit about how his life sucked, and I wanted to give him something valuable to help him. Um, I don't have too many memories of this part of the story. I didn't really write anything down in my journals. I tried looking back to when when this time period was between October of 2018 and like March of 2019. I didn't really write too much. I wrote a little bit about the Tibetan Buddhism divination of Mo, but not too much else. Back to the hero's journey parallel. Approaching the Inmost cave. This would be approaching the psychosis experience. So, again, I had been not sleeping very well, and I had also been smoking weed, so this kind of combined into a bad combination. So the night before my psychosis, I hadn't been getting much sleep, and the few days before, I had not been getting much sleep. I've been getting maybe 3 or 4 hours a night, and that night before I went into psychosis for the last time, um, I remember like trying to go to sleep, and it's kind of hazy. I had this feeling that I was trying to focus on something in particular, and then all of a sudden it was like 8:30 at night, um, 9:30. I had this intense feeling of like peace. It was very, very beautiful. I like to use the words of like uh, white light or a light yellow experience. It was really, really peaceful. And then I couldn't go back to sleep because I just had this great experience. And I started talking with the girl I was seeing, and thankfully I had the day off. But I started experiencing a heightened sense of smell, and then I went into the Inmost cave. So the Inmost cave, um, for this experience, was at the pool, a community pool that I would go to frequently to go for a swim, just to exercise. So I started off okay when I got into the pool or into the pool area, and gradually I started imagining this kind of dark figure that looked kind of like a friend I used to have, and also combined with like dark, like purple, black, blue colors and like a Picasso kind of look to him. And this like dark figure would speak to me, and I would perceive it as like thoughts that are different than my own thoughts. So it was a auditory hallucination, and not really visual hallucination because I imagined this character in my mind. It wasn't different than my imagination. It wasn't something I saw outside of myself. It was in my imagination. So I would kind of speak with this dark version of my friend, and I would hear these thoughts. I remember some thoughts came up like there was this grand conspiracy of people who wanted to make the world extremely static and rigid, and that this group wanted to force people from experiencing new feelings, like the feeling that I had earlier that night. I started imagining that dark character saying that random people in the pool were actually part of this grand conspiracy. I remember also seeing some dude in the hot tub who looked like my friend that I was talking to in my mind, that dark version, but he looked like my friend, and he had yin yang gauges in his ears, and I thought that he was part of the group that wants to fight the evil conspiracy because he looked like my friend that I was talking to in my mind, but the dark version of him. I also remember thinking that some storage closets at the pool were actually holding some kind of evil meeting, and there were evil people inside, talking to each other about something. So I actually went inside of one of those lifeguard storage closets to see if anything was going on, and there was just normal normal lifeguard equipment, not really anything out of the ordinary. And I also remember that uh, the thought came to me that if I followed around some attractive people, then I'd be safe. I even remember asking a lifeguard if I could follow them, but they're like, "Nah, don't follow me." And really awkward experience, um, looking back on it. And then I remember an older lifeguard coming up to me after I wanted to follow people around, and they said that I can't follow people around. And I remember looking at her and thinking she looked like a witch because she was really wrinkly. I'm like, oh, this is a witch, and I'm in the spiritual realm, so I should follow what she has to say. And I didn't really follow her direction very well. But so, um, I remember also where I went into the play area where kids normally play. I mean, anyone can go on it. It's not like age restricted, but like it's got those water jets and like slides and all that. It's not very big. It's maybe the size of a house, maybe a little smaller. But I remember going on the play place area and having a lot of fun. Like I remember laughing and having a lot of fun. And I remember that dark friend saying like, "Hey, I miss you having fun." And then things started to get even creepier. I went into a sauna that my pool had. It was a steam sauna, and I sat down on. So there were two levels. One level was down here, and one was up here. And then there was the ground below. So I sat on the first level, and there was a guy behind me, sitting on the second level. As I sat down, I thought um, that if I start like beating my legs like a drum, then it would kind of cue in people to like synchronize with my wavelength of thought or whatever. But then someone told me, "Hey, we don't do that there," and so I stopped. And then after I had been doing that leg drum thing, the guy that was behind me touched my tattoo, like physically touched my tattoo, and said, "Nice esoteric tattoo." And at this point, I'm like freaking out internally. I'm physically not doing anything at all, but internally, I'm like, "What's going on? I've got to be in the spirit world." And clearly, the law in the spirit world is that you talk to no one. I think I got this idea from like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where like he went to go see the spirit Ko, the face stealer, and he had to show no emotion. But I kind of interpreted that as like, if I go in the spirit world, then I should talk to no one because I don't know the rules. I know it doesn't really make any sense, but that's what I thought at the time. And when I'm in psychosis, I think whatever thoughts that come to me, I believe fully. And if someone says something and they're external to me, I won't necessarily believe what they have to say. I'll believe my thoughts. If my thoughts interpret something different than what they have to say, then I'll believe my thoughts over their words. So I'm thinking I'm in the spirit world and I should talk to no one, so I believe it. So I just sit there and ignore the guy, stay in the sauna a little longer, and then I eventually leave. I start walking around, seeing what else the spirit world might hold, but eventually I decide that I should get going. And as I'm nearing the locker rooms, I see an older Asian dude walk out of the locker rooms, and at this point I think, oh, this is the Dalai Lama, I should follow him. Again, going back to this idea that while I'm in psychosis, I believe whatever thoughts come to my mind. So this thought came to my mind, so I decided to follow him. Uh, Again, I'm remembering how that one lifeguard told me not to follow people around, but I didn't really follow that rule too well because I was in psychosis. So I start following a few feet behind him, and then the guy eventually goes into the lazy river that was at my pool. So he gets in the river, and so I follow him in, and I sort of lean back. I go a little bit ways in, and then I lean back on the wall, and I just kind of chill there as the water is like going past me. And while I'm in this lazy river, the thought occurs to me of this means nothing. This meaning in reference to all the delusional thoughts that I had been thinking about. All of this idea that like there's some grand conspiracy to like keep the world rigid, or that people are sucking emotions out of people. All these delusions mean nothing. And so I kept repeating this mantra of this means nothing. This means nothing. This has no meaning. Different iterations of all of this meaning nothing at all. And going back to this idea that when I'm in this psychotic state that I believe whatever thought comes in my mind, this is like the healthy thought that came to my mind that wasn't delusional. This was like helpful for my mind, despite the fact that I was in psychosis. Um, but going back to when I was repeating this mantra of this means nothing, I remember that guy that was in the sauna who touched my tattoo. He went in the lazy river too, and he was on one of those float rings, and he would like put his arms on and just float there. He was just going by, and he was trying to get my attention. I was just repeating the mantra over and over, and some chick that he was talking to that was with him, like physically next to that guy, said like, "Oh, he must be in samadhi," and I'm like, just thinking, I don't know what that means. All this means nothing. None of this means anything at all. And I just ignored those two people and started continuing on the mantra. And um, so then, as I'm continuing this mantra in my mind, I imagine that dark uh, figure that looked like my friend, that Picasso-like figure guy. And then I remember imagining All Might from My Hero Academia. If you haven't watched the anime, he's a superhero, kind of akin to Superman. Um, Very big and muscular, has blonde hair, very powerful, the most powerful in the anime. And I remember imagining All Might and imagining the dark figure that looked like my friend. And as I'm repeating this mantra, I like imagine All Might like absolutely wreck the dark figure, and then it like the dark figure like splattered in my mind. The backdrop of all this is like just black, just pure black. It's just this dark figure and All Might in a black area, and All Might punches the guy, and he splatters everywhere. The blood gets on this invisible wall. It was really a visceral feeling. And looking back, I see how this was a huge symbol for me, showing me that I have the power to destroy these delusional thoughts. Going back to the reason that I started looking into spiritual stuff again, back to the call to adventure of me trying to find the archetypal mind or understand the archetypal mind. This All Might figure is representative of like a warrior figure, this like thing that protects, and it protected me. Um, but going back to the hero's journey, that's that imagine that imagined experience of All Might punching the character is the reward portion of the hero's journey. This is like I'm in the ordeal, I'm in the Inmost cave, and then I succeed in conquering whatever it is that I needed to conquer. Going into the road back portion of the hero's journey, I eventually leave. I leave the pool, and my parents notice that something's off. I'm acting a little different. I'm doing things I don't normally do, and they're like, "Hey, you should probably stop doing all this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should probably stop doing all this." And I remember it took some time. Well, not too much time. I remember taking Zyprexa, the antipsychotic drug I used to take, and it gave me the feeling of being watched again. So I figured at that point, yeah, this definitely proves that I'm getting this feeling of being watched. So then I didn't take Zyprexa ever again after that day. And going back into the road back part of the hero's journey, this took a little bit longer than the last experience. This road back involved me and my relationship with the girl I had been seeing. I remember seeing myself like a father figure to this woman. I would take her places, pay for most of the things that we did. I got her the job that I worked at. I remember having to console her because her cat wasn't eating as much. I gave her my computer a few days before my psychosis experience. Um, So it was like in a psychotic state that I gave her my computer. Um, really, I felt really tired when I was in that relationship, and so this is like I needed to eventually let go of the relationship, and this was the road back. Um, Eventually, I did break up with her, and um, I still work with her, but we don't really talk or communicate besides work stuff. So getting into the hero's journey, uh, return with the elixir, which is the very last step in the hero's journey. Um, about I would say it took about a year before I recognized like what exactly I need to do to stay out of psychosis. I remember eventually finding something called the internal family systems, which is extremely similar to this idea of the archetypal mind I found in that spiritual book, The Law of One. The internal family systems states that there's different parts of your mind, like the healer, the sage, etc., that you can imagine and talk to, but they're still you. They're an extension of yourself. They're like a puppet you talk to, but it's still you. I remember also getting into epistemology. Um, a guy named Anthony Magnabosco, he's a YouTuber who just talks with people about their beliefs, and I using his videos, I was able to notice how I can try to prove or disprove beliefs that I have in my mind. And then I also learned about nonviolent communication, which is this idea of like um, noticing your emotional feelings and attaching a internal need to those emotional feelings just to understand where you're coming from. Um, and these three things, these internal family systems, epistemology, and nonviolent communication, are kind of the baseline or the base by which I can support myself, as well as just pushing away everything that I attribute to the psychosis, like magical thinking, weed, and lack of sleep, and maybe lack of nutrition. But those three ideas are like the base by which I hold my standards to. And going back to the hero's journey arc, at the end, the hero like expresses his story. He expresses what he went through and the trials that he overcame and the experiences that he had. And I see how I'm doing that right now in this video, and it feels good to express what I've gone through multiple times. Like I've told this story to um, a bunch of friends that I've met online and in person. I've told the story on this YouTube channel. I've told the story to another YouTuber. So me expressing the story is me like giving myself like something to hold myself accountable, and it also feels good to tell it. Um, so that's the end of the Hero's Journey Part 2. Hopefully, I don't have another Hero's Journey that includes psychosis. Really don't want to go back. It hurts a lot. It's like mind twisting. Don't want to go back. But that is the end of that. And the next few videos, I want to get into very detailed explanations of my whole journey. I've given a good overview, but I haven't given like very specific examples. I've got journal entries that I'll probably reference later on when I think they're relevant, and then we'll go from there. So that's my video, and thanks for watching. Have a good one.